A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Echoes in the Blood. Sarah ground the dried yarrow leaves between her palms, watching the pale green powder fall into the clay bowl. The scent was bitter and clean, cutting through the heavier smells of the apothecary, earth and old wood and something faintly metallic that never quite left the stones. 5 years she had worked in this cramped shop at the edge of the market square. 5 years of measuring and mixing, of treating minor ailments and keeping her head down. 5 years of being nobody. That was how she survived. That was how she stayed safe. The shop door opened with a creak of hinges, letting in a shaft of afternoon light and the sounds of the market beyond. Sarah did not look up. She kept her focus on the herbs, on the familiar rhythm of her hands, on the suppressors she wore in a leather pouch against her skin. The herbs inside were her own recipe, renewed every morning, keeping her omega scent dulled to almost nothing. Most wolves who passed her thought she was a weak beta at best. That was intentional. That was necessary. Being an omega in the borderlands was dangerous without pack protection. Being an unclaimed omega was worse. Sarah had learned that lesson when her status had manifested 3 years ago, sudden and terrifying at 20. Far later than most. Her mother had been a beta. Her father had been a beta. But Sarah had woken one morning with her scent blooming like wildfire, drawing every unmated male within a mile radius to her door. She had crafted the first batch of suppressors that same day, her hands shaking so badly she had nearly burned herself on the heating iron. The recipe had been in one of her grandmother's old journals, written in faded ink and accompanied by warnings. Suppressors were not foolproof. They required constant renewal. They could fail if the herbs were old or improperly mixed, or if the omega experienced extreme stress. Sarah had been careful. She bought her supplies from 3 different merchants, never the same one twice in a row. She tested each batch on herself before wearing it. She avoided crowded places during the full moon when her scent was strongest. For 3 years, it had worked. Sarah. The voice belonged to Mistress Haldis, the old woman who owned the shop. She stood in the doorway to the back room, wiping her hands on her apron. Lord Carrick's holding a banquet tonight. Royal visit. He wants healers on hand in case anyone overindulges. Sarah's hands stilled on the mortar. Royal visit? The Alpha King himself. Haldis's expression was unreadable. First time in decades he's come this far south. Making his rounds, settling disputes, checking the tributes. Lord Carrick's practically vibrating with nerves. The Alpha King. Sarah had never seen him. Few had. He governed all the packs of the realm from his seat in the northern capital, a distant figure of power and justice. They said he was fair. They said he was ruthless. They said he had been unmarked for 7 years, ever since he took the throne, and the council was growing impatient for an heir. I need to stay here, Sarah said quietly. Finish the inventory. Haldis snorted. You need to eat. When was the last time you had a proper meal? You are too thin, girl. Go to the banquet. Eat the Lord's food. Smile at the nobles. Come back when it is done. She paused, studying Sarah with eyes that had seen too many winters. You cannot hide forever. Sarah wanted to argue. Wanted to say that yes, actually, she could hide forever if it kept her safe. But Haldis was already turning away, disappearing into the back room where she kept the rare ingredients under lock and key. The banquet. A hall full of wolves and nobles and warriors. The Alpha King. Sarah pressed a hand to the pouch of suppressors. The herbs inside were fresh. She had renewed them that morning. It would be fine. She would stay in the background. Healers were meant to be invisible anyway. That evening, Sarah dressed in the plainest gown she owned. Gray wool, long sleeves, high collar. She braided her copper-red hair back tightly and pinned it in a knot at the base of her skull. No jewelry, no adornment, nothing to draw attention. The walk to Lord Carrick's estate took 20 minutes through winding cobblestone streets. The castle, more of a fortified manor really, sat on a low hill overlooking the town, its stone walls dark against the twilight sky. Torches burned in iron brackets along the walls. Guards stood at attention by the gates, their eyes tracking her as she approached. Healer, she said quietly. showing the small wooden token Haldies had given her. The guard waved her through without comment. Inside, the great hall blazed with light. Dozens of candles burned in iron chandeliers overhead. Long tables stretched the length of the room, already crowded with nobles and merchants and warriors. The air was thick with the smells of roasted meat and spiced wine and too many wolves in close quarters. Sarah felt her stomach turn. She pressed a hand to the suppressors, feeling the familiar weight. She found a spot along the wall near the kitchens, where the other healers had gathered. 2 older women and a young man, all wearing similar plain clothing. They nodded to her in acknowledgement, but did not speak. That was good. She did not want conversation. She wanted to wait out the evening and return home. At the head of the hall, Lord Carrick stood from his chair, raising a silver goblet. He was a portly man with a florid face, clearly nervous despite his attempts at joviality. "Honored guests," he called, his voice carrying over the din. "Tonight we have the great privilege of hosting our Alpha King. Let us welcome him with the respect and loyalty he is owed." The hall fell silent. Every head turned toward the massive oak doors at the far end. They opened slowly, almost reverently. The man who entered was not what Sarah had expected. She had pictured someone older, perhaps. Someone adorned in finery and jewels, dripping with the symbols of power. Instead, the Alpha King wore simple dark leather and wool, a sword belted at his hip, his black hair pulled back from a face that was all sharp angles and hard lines. A beard, neatly trimmed, framed his jaw, but it was his eyes that struck her. Gray, almost silver, and so focused they seemed to cut through the crowd like blades. He was tall, broad-shouldered. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator who knew exactly how dangerous he was. Behind him walked a single companion, a younger man with pale hair and the bearing of a warrior. A beta, judging by the deference others showed him. The Alpha King crossed the hall without preamble, accepting Lord Carrick's bowing greeting with a slight nod. He took his seat at the high table. The hall exhaled collectively and returned to its noise. Sarah pressed herself further against the wall. Her heart was beating too quickly. She told herself it was just nerves, just the proximity to so much power. Nothing to do with the way her skin prickled when she looked at him. Nothing to do with the strange pull low in her stomach. The feast began. Servants brought platters of venison and boar and roasted vegetables. Wine flowed freely. Sarah kept her post by the wall, attending to a minor burn on a servant's hand, and listening to a drunk merchant complain about indigestion. Routine work. Easy work. She was helping an elderly woman back to her seat when it happened. The scent hit her first. A sudden wrongness in the air. She glanced down at the pouch against her skin. The leather looked darker. Damp. Her stomach dropped. No. No, no, no. The merchant who sold her the last batch of herbs. She had been in a hurry. She had not checked them as carefully as usual. And now, her suppressors were failing. Sarah felt it like a dam breaking. Her omega scent flooded out, no longer muted and hidden, but blooming in the crowded hall. Sweet and wild and utterly unmistakable. Heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every unmated male within 30 feet suddenly found a reason to look in her direction. Panic clawed at Sarah's throat. She needed to leave. Now. Before, at the high table, the Alpha King went rigid. His head snapped toward her with inhuman speed. The goblet in his hand hit the table with a dull thud. His eyes locked onto hers across the length of the hall, and the world tilted sideways. The mate bond slammed into Sarah like a physical blow. It was not gentle. It was not the soft recognition she had heard described in stories. It was a chain wrapping around her ribs, pulling tight, stealing the breath from her lungs. Heat flooded her veins. Her knees buckled. Across the hall, the Alpha King was on his feet. His expression was not wonder or joy. It was shock. Raw, unfiltered shock. And something else. Something that looked horribly like pain. Sarah turned and ran. She did not remember leaving the hall, did not remember pushing through the confused crowd or stumbling down the corridor. She only knew that she needed air, needed space, needed to escape the suffocating weight of that bond pulling at her. Strong hands caught her arm before she reached the doors. She spun, heart hammering, and found herself staring up at the Alpha King. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. Taller than she had realized, the scent of him, pine and smoke and something darker, wrapped around her senses. "You," he said, and his voice was rough, strained. "Who are you?" Sarah tried to pull away. His grip was not painful, but it was unbreakable. "Let me go." "I cannot." He said it like a confession, like an apology. His gray eyes searched her face with desperate intensity. "Your scent." "It is." He stopped, swallowed hard. Impossible. The mate bond pulsed between them, a living thing. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. This could not be happening. Not to her. Not with him. "Please," she whispered. "I need to go." Something in her voice seemed to reach him. His expression shifted, some of the shock fading into something resembling control. "You are Omega." Not a question. "Unmated." She nodded. "Then you will stay here tonight. The guest quarters. For your protection." He released her arm but did not step back. "What is your name?" "Sarah?" It came out barely audible. "Sarah?" He repeated it like he was testing the weight of it. Then, to someone behind her, "Torin, escort her to the East Wing. Post guards. No one approaches without my permission." The pale-haired man, Torin, appeared at her side. His expression was carefully neutral. "My lord." Sarah wanted to protest, wanted to run again, but the mate bond was still pulling at her, insistent and overwhelming, and she suddenly was not sure her legs would carry her far. She let Torin guide her through corridors of stone, up a winding staircase, into a room with a heavy oak door and a narrow window. "You will be safe here," Torin said quietly. Then he was gone, the door closing with a solid thunk. Sarah crossed to the window on shaking legs. It overlooked the courtyard. From this height, she could see the torches burning along the walls, the guards making their rounds, and in the center of the courtyard, a massive white wolf pacing in circles. The Alpha King. Even in wolf form, he was enormous. His fur gleamed silver white in the moonlight, but it was the way he moved that caught her. Restless, agitated, circling the same path over and over. Every few moments, he would stop and tilt his head back, a low howl rising from his throat, a sound of conflict, of something breaking apart. Sarah pressed her hand to the glass. The mate bond thrummed in her chest, responding to his distress. She did not know him, did not understand why the moon goddess would bind her to a king, but watching him pace alone in the dark, she felt something crack open inside her. Something that had been locked away for 5 years, ever since the day she had buried her twin sister and learned what it meant to survive alone. The wolf howled again, and Sarah closed her eyes against the answering pull in her blood. Chapter 2. Shadows of Truth. Morning light crept through the narrow window, gray and cold. Sarah had not slept. She had spent the night sitting on the edge of the bed, watching the courtyard below, watching the white wolf pace until the sky began to pale. Only then had he shifted back to human form and disappeared into the castle. The mate bond hummed in her chest, a constant presence she could not ignore. It pulled at her even now, tugging her toward wherever he was in this sprawling stone fortress. She pressed her fist against her sternum, trying to suppress the sensation. It did not work. A knock at the door made her jump. Before she could respond, Torin entered carrying a tray of food. Bread, cheese, dried fruit, a clay cup of something that smelled like mint tea. He set it on the small table by the window without meeting her eyes. "The Alpha King requests your presence in the solar," he said. His tone was formal, careful. "When you are ready." Sarah stood, smoothing her wrinkled gown. "And if I refuse?" Torin's expression flickered with something that might have been sympathy. "He will wait, but he will not let you leave the castle until you speak with him." He paused at the door. "For what it is worth, I have known him for 10 years. He is not a cruel man, but he is a king, and right now, he is a very confused one." The solar turned out to be a round room at the top of the western tower. Tall windows let in streams of pale sunlight. A fire burned in the hearth despite the season, chasing away the perpetual chill of stone walls. The Alpha King stood with his back to the door, staring out at the landscape beyond. He turned when she entered. In daylight, he looked exhausted. There were shadows under his gray eyes, tension in the set of his shoulders. The beard did nothing to hide the hard line of his jaw. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of 2 chairs by the fire. Not a command, a request. Sarah remained standing. "Why am I here?" Something flashed across his face. Frustration, maybe, or resignation. "Because I need to understand." He moved closer, and Sarah forced herself not to step back. The mate bond flared at his proximity, heat spreading through her veins. "Your scent. It is identical to someone I knew. Someone I lost." "Scents can be similar," Sarah said, though her mouth had gone dry. "Not like this." His voice was rough. "Tell me about your family, your parents, siblings." "Why? Please." The word seemed to cost him something. "I will explain. But I need to know first." Sarah crossed her arms, a barrier between them. "My parents are dead. Killed by rogues 3 years ago on the northern road. The grief was old now, worn smooth by time, but it still ached. I had a sister. A twin. Aurora." She watched his face carefully. "She died 5 years ago. We were 18. The change in his expression was immediate and devastating. The color drained from his face. His hands, which had been loose at his sides, clenched into fists. For a long moment he simply stared at her, and Sarah saw something crack open behind his eyes. Pain, raw and bleeding. "Aurora," he repeated, voice barely above a whisper. Then, louder, almost angry. "She did not die." The world tilted. Sarah grabbed the back of the chair to steady herself. "What? She did not die 5 years ago." He turned away sharply, ran a hand through his hair. "She became ill. Very ill. She was taken to a place where she could be cared for. Her family, your family, they told everyone she had died because the illness she carries is shameful, terrifying. People do not understand it." Sarah's mind was spinning. Aurora alive. Aurora sick. Aurora hidden away for 5 years while Sarah had mourned her, had visited an empty grave, had believed herself utterly alone in the world. "You are lying." "I am not." He faced her again, and the anguish in his expression was undeniable. "I wish I were. I wish—" He stopped, drew a breath. "I need to send word to my people. Confirm what I suspect. But if you are Aurora's twin, if you share her blood, then that explains everything." "Explains what?" "Why your scent called to me like hers did. Why the mate bond formed so strongly." He took a step toward her, then seemed to think better of it. "I knew Aurora. We were close, very close. And then she became ill, and I lost her." The pieces were starting to fit together in a pattern Sarah did not want to see. "How close?" He met her eyes. "She was my mate." The room spun. Sarah sank into the chair, her legs giving out. The Alpha King, Cain, she realized she did not even know his name properly until Torin had used it last night, stood rigid, watching her process this revelation. "You felt the mate bond with my sister," Sarah said slowly. "And now you feel it with me." "Yes, that is not possible. The moon goddess does not make mistakes like that." "I do not think it is a mistake." Cain moved to the other chair, sitting heavily. He looked older suddenly, weighed down by something invisible. Identical twins share more than appearance. They share scent, essence, the very fabric of what makes them wolves. "If Aurora was my mate, and you are her mirror," he trailed off, "then I am just a replacement." The words tasted bitter. "A convenient substitute for what you lost." "No." The vehemence in his voice startled her. "I do not know what you are. I do not know what this bond means. But I need to find out. And to do that, I need information." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Stay here. 3 days. Let me send riders to confirm Aurora's status. Let me understand what is happening. Then I will tell you everything." Sarah wanted to refuse, wanted to demand he let her go immediately, but the mate bond was pulling at her, and beneath her anger was a desperate, painful hope. "If she is alive, I want to see her." "If she is alive and well, yes. But Sarah, He hesitated. The illness she has is not kind. She may not be the sister you remember. The next 3 days were a special kind of torment. Sarah was not precisely a prisoner. She could walk the castle grounds, take meals in the hall, speak to the servants. But guards shadowed her steps, polite but constant, and the Alpha King had vanished into whatever business occupied him. Or so it seemed. Sarah caught glimpses of him from windows, crossing the courtyard with Torin, speaking in low, urgent tones to riders who departed at speed. Once, she saw him standing alone on the battlements at sunset, looking north toward the capital. The mate bond made it impossible to truly avoid him. She felt his presence like a compass needle finding north. When he was near, her skin prickled. When he was distant, there was an ache low in her chest that would not ease. On the second day, he sent her a gift. A small wooden box delivered by a nervous servant girl. Inside, nestled in cloth, was a necklace, a silver chain with a crescent moon pendant. Simple. Beautiful. For Omegas under the protection of the crown, the servant said, repeating what she had clearly been told to say. A tradition. Sarah closed the box without putting it on. Traditions, protection, pretty words for captivity. The fourth night, Sarah had waited long enough. She slipped from her room after the castle had settled into sleep, moving quietly through corridors lit only by scattered torches. She knew where the Alpha King's chambers were. She had watched servants coming and going. The door was unlocked. Arrogant. Or perhaps he simply did not fear intrusion. Sarah pushed it open, slipping inside before she could reconsider. The room was sparse for a king. A large bed against one wall, a desk cluttered with maps and correspondence, shelves holding weapons and a few books, and under the bed, barely visible, the edge of an iron-bound chest. Sarah knelt, pulling it out. The lock was simple. She retrieved a knife from the desk and worked at it until something clicked. The lid lifted. The first thing she saw was letters, dozens of them, sealed with wax that bore an unfamiliar symbol, a crescent moon over waves. She opened one at random. Medical terminology filled the page. Patient status reports. Condition deteriorating. Increased sedation required. Moments of lucidity decreasing. The celestial wing. It was referenced over and over. Some kind of institution. Beneath the letters, wrapped in silk, was a painting. Small, the size of Sarah's palm, but exquisitely detailed. A young woman's face, copper-red hair, amber eyes. Sarah's own face, but softer somehow. The woman in the painting wore a gown of deep blue, formal and expensive, and around her throat, a necklace identical to the one Cain had sent Sarah. Aurora. It had to be. The sister she remembered as a child, now grown, beautiful and smiling, and utterly unknown. What are you doing? Sarah dropped the painting. It clattered against the chest as she spun to find Cain standing in the doorway. He was still dressed, as if he had not yet attempted sleep. His expression was unreadable. You lied to me, Sarah said, finding her voice. You said you would explain in 3 days. But you already know, do you not? You have known since the moment you saw me. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, knelt beside her. Up close, the exhaustion was even more apparent. I needed confirmation. I needed to be certain before I told you something that would shatter your world. My world is already shattered. Sarah gestured at the painting. This is her. Aurora. And these... She held up one of the letters. These say she is in some kind of institution, that she is sedated, that she is dying. Cain took the letter gently from her hand, set it aside. She is not dying. Not anymore. The latest report says she is stable, but she is not well, Sarah. She suffers from something called lunar dissociation. It is a disease of the mind and spirit. It makes her lose herself, lose control. She was a danger to others and to herself. The celestial wing is where she can be kept safe. And you just left her there. Sarah's voice shook. You felt the mate bond with her and then abandoned her when she became inconvenient. No, the word was fierce. I tried everything. Every healer in the kingdom. Every treatment. Every prayer to the moon goddess. Nothing worked. And Aurora. His voice broke. Aurora begged me to let her go, to stop trying to save someone who was already lost. So I gave her what she asked for. I let them take her somewhere she could not hurt anyone. And I let her family tell the world she had died because that was kinder than the truth. Sarah stared at him, at the pain etched into every line of his face. You loved her. I did. He did not look away. She was bright and kind, and she deserved better than what fate gave her. But I could not save her. And I have carried that failure for 5 years. And now you have found me. Sarah picked up the necklace from the box, let the chain slide through her fingers. The same face, the same scent. A second chance. I do not know what you are to me yet, Kane said quietly, but I need to find out. And if Aurora truly is alive and you are her sister, then you deserve to know the truth. All of it. He reached for the painting, held it carefully. She is at the Celestial Wing in the capital, 2 weeks' travel from here. When my business in this region is finished, I will take you to her. You can see for yourself. You will let me go? I will take you. He corrected. And then, if you wish to leave, I will not stop you. The mate bond is not a chain, Sarah. I will not force it on you. She wanted to argue, wanted to rage at him for the secrets, for the presumption, for the way the bond pulled at her even now. But looking at him, at the shadows under his eyes, at the careful way he held the painting of a woman he had lost, she found her anger faltering. I want the truth, she said instead, about Aurora, about this illness, about why you look at me like I am a ghost. You will have it. He stood, offered her his hand. I swear it. Sarah did not take his hand. She rose on her own, brushed past him toward the door. But at the threshold she paused. My sister was your mate, and you let her go. Why should I believe you will not do the same to me? Kane's expression was bleak. Because I have already made that mistake once, and it has haunted me every day since. Chapter 3. Flight and Confession. The argument began at dawn. Sarah stood in the solar, arms crossed, chin lifted in defiance despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. She had spent what remained of the night after their confrontation pacing her room. The mate bond a constant throb beneath her ribs. Now, with pale morning light streaming through the windows, she faced Kane across the space between them and made her demand. I want to see her, today. Kane's expression was carefully controlled, but she saw the tension in his jaw. He had been examining a map when she entered, Torin at his shoulder discussing supply routes. Now both men looked at her with varying degrees of concern. That is not possible, Kane said. Why not? You admitted she is alive. You have the location. We can leave within the hour. Sarah. He set down the compass he had been holding, gave Torin a look that sent the beta retreating from the room. When they were alone, Kane turned his full attention to her. The Celestial Wing is 2 weeks' travel from here. And even if we left today, I would not take you to see Aurora without preparation, without understanding what you would face. She is my sister. I have mourned her for 5 years. I have every right. She is in stage 4 lunar dissociation. His voice was flat, clinical, as if reciting from one of those medical reports. She spends weeks at a time unconscious in wolf form. When she wakes, she does not recognize anyone. She has not spoken a coherent sentence in 3 years. If you walked into that room expecting the sister you remember, you would be destroyed by what you found. Sarah felt something hot and sharp twist in her chest. And you think I am too weak to handle that? I think you deserve better than to have your last memory of Aurora replaced by something that will haunt you. He moved closer. And despite herself, Sarah felt the mate bond flare in response. I am trying to protect you. By keeping me ignorant? By deciding what I can and cannot know about my own sister? She laughed, bitter. Or is this about something else? You want to keep me here, in this castle, away from Aurora. Because if I see her, if I see what she has become, I will realize exactly what I am to you. His eyes narrowed. And what is that? A replacement. The word tasted like poison. The functional version of the woman you lost. The twin who can still smile and speak and play the role of mate without inconveniencing you with illness or madness. The silence that followed was sharp as a blade. Cain stared at her, something dangerous flickering behind his gray eyes. When he spoke, his voice was low and controlled, but she heard the anger underneath. You think that is what this is? You think I looked at you and saw a convenient substitute? Did you not? Sarah challenged. You felt the mate bond because my scent is identical to hers. You gave me the same necklace you gave her. You look at me like I am a ghost wearing her face. Tell me, when you close your eyes at night, which one of us do you see? Both. The admission came out rough. I see both of you, and I hate myself for it. The raw honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She watched him turn away, saw the rigid line of his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and released at his sides. You want to know why I hesitate to take you to Aurora? He continued. Because I am a coward. Because I spent 5 years trying to forget what it was like to watch someone I loved lose themselves piece by piece. And now you stand here wearing her face, carrying her scent, and I do not know if I am strong enough to watch it happen again. Then let me go. Sarah's voice cracked despite her efforts to keep it steady. If I am such a burden, such a painful reminder, then release me from this bond and let me walk away. Cain turned back to her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. I cannot or will not. Both. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, and Sarah found herself backed against the stone wall, his presence overwhelming. But he did not touch her, did not cage her in. He simply stood close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the pine and smoke scent that made the mate bond sing. You think I have not tried? You think I did not spend the last 4 nights attempting to convince myself that this bond is a mistake? That you would be better off free? And I am selfish. His voice dropped to something just above a whisper. Because even knowing what I know, even understanding the danger, I cannot make myself let you go. Sarah's heart was beating too fast. The mate bond thrummed between them, insistent and undeniable. You are right. You are a coward. His jaw tightened, but he did not argue. And I am leaving anyway. She moved before he could react, ducking under his arm and running for the door. She heard him call her name, heard his footsteps behind her. But she was already down the corridor, taking the stairs 2 at a time toward the ground level. The stables. If she could reach the stables, steal a horse before anyone stopped her. She burst through the doors into the pre-dawn courtyard. Guards turned to stare, but she did not slow. The stable entrance was ahead, already showing signs of activity as grooms prepared for the day's work. Sarah grabbed the first saddled horse she saw, a gray gelding, already bridled. The groom shouted in protest, but she was already swinging herself up, heels digging into the horse's flanks. They burst from the stable at a gallop. Behind her, she heard shouts, heard someone calling for the gates to be closed. But she was faster. The gelding responded to her urgency, stretching into a full run as they cleared the courtyard and hit the road leading away from the castle. Trees closed in on either side. The road was narrow here, winding through ancient forest that had stood long before any castle was built. Sarah leaned low over the horse's neck, branches whipping past. She made it perhaps 2 miles before the wolf appeared. It came from the trees to her left. A flash of white fur, massive beyond any normal wolf. The gelding screamed and reared, nearly throwing her. Sarah clung to the reins, but the horse was panicking, spinning in circles as the white wolf circled them with predatory patience. "Get away from me!" Sarah shouted. The wolf just sat there in the middle of the road, head tilted, watching her with gray eyes that were painfully familiar. Cain. The horse was not calming. If anything, its terror was increasing. Sarah made a decision born of desperation. She slid from the saddle, landing hard on the packed earth. The gelding took the opportunity to bolt back toward the castle, leaving her alone with the massive white wolf. "Shift back," she demanded. "Face me as a man, not a beast." The wolf did not move, did not shift. It simply watched her with those unnerving, intelligent eyes. Sarah backed up a step, then another. The wolf stood, following at an easy pace. When she turned to run, It was suddenly in front of her, blocking the path. Not aggressive, not threatening, just present, unavoidable. Fine. Sarah sat down right there in the middle of the road, crossing her arms. Then we wait until you decide to act like something other than a brute. The wolf regarded her for a long moment. Then, in a fluid motion that should not have been possible, it shifted. Cain stood before her, barefoot and bare-chested, his dark hair loose around his shoulders. The morning light caught the edges of old scars that marked his torso, signs of battles fought and survived. "You cannot run from this," he said quietly. "Watch me try." He crouched, bringing himself closer to her level. "Where will you go? Back to the borderlands? To a shop and a life spent hiding what you are? You are Omega, Sarah. Unmated and unprotected. Every male within a day's travel will scent you. You will spend the rest of your life running from bonds far less kind than this one. Better that than being a replacement for a dead woman. She is not dead." The correction was automatic. "Pained. And you are not her. Then why do you look at me the way you do? Why does your voice break when you say her name?" Cain was silent for a long moment. Around them, the forest continued its morning song. Birds calling, leaves rustling in a breeze that smelled of earth and growing things. Finally he spoke. "When I met Aurora, she was 17, brought to court as part of a diplomatic delegation from the Southern Territories. She was light. That is the only way I can describe her. She lit up every room she entered. She loved music and dancing and terrible poetry. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. The mate bond formed slowly between us. Over months, it was gentle, inevitable, like watching dawn break. Sarah found herself listening despite herself. We had 6 months before the disease began to manifest. 6 months of something close to happiness. And then, his voice roughened. Then she started losing time. She would wake in strange places with no memory of how she arrived. Once, I found her in the forest at dawn, naked and covered in blood from a deer she had killed and did not remember hunting. She wept in my arms and begged me to make it stop. The lunar dissociation, Sarah said softly. Yes, it starts with memory loss, progresses to hallucinations, voices that command, visions that terrify. Eventually, the person loses the ability to distinguish between human and wolf, between self and instinct. They become trapped, unable to fully shift or fully return, and there is no cure. He looked at her directly, and the pain in his eyes was a physical thing. I consulted every healer in the kingdom, spent a fortune on treatments that did nothing, begged the moon goddess for mercy, and Aurora, his voice broke. Aurora held on as long as she could, but in her last moments of true lucidity, she made me promise something. She made me swear that I would let her go, that I would stop trying to save someone who was already lost. So I did. I let them take her to the celestial wing, and I let her family arrange a funeral that did not require a body. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. Her family, my parents, they knew. They wanted to protect you from the truth. You were young, already traumatized by losing your sister. They thought it kinder to let you believe she had died quickly rather than slowly, painfully, in a facility far from home. They died 3 years ago, Sarah said, the words thick in her throat. On the northern road. Rogues. Something shifted in Cain's expression. Surprise. Then understanding. Then something that looked like guilt. The northern road. They were traveling to the capital. How do you know? Because 3 years ago I lifted the secrecy order on the celestial wing. Families could visit if they wished. Your parents, they must have been trying to reach Aurora. He closed his eyes. They were attacked because I did not provide adequate protection for that route. Because I was careless. The weight of that knowledge settled between them. Sarah's parents, trying to reach the daughter they had hidden away. Dying in the attempt. You said the disease is hereditary, Sarah said, breaking the silence. Cain's eyes opened, focused on her with painful intensity. In identical twins, yes. There is a 40% chance. But Sarah, so I might be carrying it. This thing that destroyed my sister. This thing that will make me lose myself piece by piece until there is nothing left but a shell." She laughed, high and brittle. "And you knew." "You knew, and you did not tell me. I was trying to confirm it first, to understand what it would mean for you, for us. I did not want to destroy you with a possibility, so instead you kept me in the dark, made me think I was going mad for feeling what I felt." She stood abruptly, backing away from him. "The mate bond. Does it even matter? If I have this disease, if I am going to end up like Aurora, then what is the point?" Kane rose as well, and there was something fierce in his expression. "The point is that you are here, now. That for whatever reason, the moon goddess bound us together. And I will be damned if I waste whatever time we have because of fear. Even if that time ends with me forgetting your face, forgetting my own name, even then." He took a step toward her. "Because I failed Aurora. I gave up when she asked me to, and I have regretted that choice every day since. If you carry this disease, if the worst happens, I will not make the same mistake twice. I will fight for you until my last breath." The conviction in his voice was absolute. Sarah felt something crack open inside her. The careful walls she had built, the armor she wore to survive. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that this was not just guilt speaking, not just a second chance at redemption. "I need to see her," she said finally. "I need to see Aurora, see what I might become. And then I will decide what happens next." Kane nodded slowly. "When we return to the capital, I will take you to the celestial wing myself. But Sarah, prepare yourself. What you will see will not be easy. Nothing about this is easy." They stood in the forest road, the sun climbing higher, the mate bond humming between them like a living thing. Finally, Kane offered his hand. "Come back to the castle. Let me finish my business here. 2 weeks, and we will ride for the capital. I swear it." Sarah looked at his outstretched hand, at the scars on his knuckles, the calluses from sword work, at the steadiness in his gray eyes. She did not take his hand, but she walked beside him back toward the castle. And for now, that was a start. Chapter 4. The Capital's Shadow. The journey to the capital took 2 weeks, as Kane had promised. They traveled with a small contingent. Torin, 8 guards, and a handful of servants. Kane had offered Sarah a place in the royal carriage, cushioned and enclosed, but she had chosen to ride. The gray mare they gave her was steady and calm, nothing like the panicked gelding she had stolen. They spoke little during the journey. Kane rode at the head of the column, attending to matters of governance that followed him even on the road. Messengers arrived and departed daily, carrying sealed orders and reports. Sarah watched him work from a distance, saw the weight of the crown in every decision he made. At night, they camped in clearings or stayed at way stations maintained for royal travel. Sarah kept to herself, taking meals alone in her tent, avoiding the pull of the mate bond that grew stronger with each passing day. She could feel him even through canvas walls, could sense when he was near or distant. It was maddening. On the 10th night, Torin sought her out. The beta appeared at her tent with 2 cups of mulled wine and an expression that suggested he had been volunteered for an uncomfortable task. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the log she sat on by her small fire. Sarah nodded. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping wine that tasted of cinnamon and cloves. "He is trying," Torin said finally, "in case you have not noticed." "Trying what?" "To give you space. To not overwhelm you with the bond." Torin studied the flames. "I have known Kane for 10 years, since before he was king, and I have never seen him this uncertain." "Good," Sarah said. Then, because that sounded harsher than she intended, "He should be uncertain. This entire situation is impossible." "Agreed." Torin took another sip. "For what it is worth, I knew Aurora. Not well. I was just a young guard then. But I knew her. And you are different from her." Sarah looked at him sharply. "How?" She was gentle, soft-spoken. She moved through the court like water, adapting to whatever shape was required of her. He met Sarah's eyes. "You are fire. You challenge. You fight. Even now, Exhausted and afraid, you do not bend. I do not know if that is a compliment. It is an observation. Torrin stood, setting down his empty cup. Cain loved Aurora. I think part of him always will. But Sarah, what he feels when he looks at you now, it is not the same. It is something new. Something that terrifies him because he does not know how to name it yet. He left before she could respond. The capital rose before them on the 13th day, a sprawling city of stone and wood built in concentric circles around the massive royal castle at its heart. The castle itself was a fortress of gray stone, its towers reaching toward the sky like fingers grasping at clouds. Sarah had never seen anything so large. They entered through the main gates to the sound of horns announcing the king's return. Citizens lined the streets, calling out greetings and blessings. Cain acknowledged them with waves and nods, the perfect image of a beloved ruler. Inside the castle walls, servants rushed to attend them. Sarah was shown to a suite of rooms in the eastern wing, far more luxurious than anything she had experienced. A massive bed with silk hangings, a bathing chamber with heated water piped in through copper tubing, windows that overlooked gardens so extensive they seemed like forests unto themselves. "The Alpha King requests your presence for dinner," a young woman said, helping Sarah out of her travel-stained cloak. "But first, you should rest. Bathe. We will bring food if you prefer to eat here." Sarah chose the latter. She was not ready to face the court, to endure the stares and whispers that would inevitably follow. Instead, she soaked in water hot enough to turn her skin pink, washing away 2 weeks of road dust. That evening, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Cain, dressed in formal court attire. Deep blue velvet, silver embroidery, a circlet of silver across his brow. He looked every inch the king. It was jarring after weeks of seeing him in travel leathers. "I wanted to show you something," he said, "if you will allow it." She followed him through corridors lit by oil lamps and iron brackets. The castle was a maze, but Cain navigated it with ease, taking her deeper into the residential wing. Finally, he stopped before a door carved with intricate patterns, moons and stars, and wolves running. "This was Aurora's room," he said quietly. "I have kept it as she left it. No one has been inside since she was taken to the celestial wing." He produced a key, unlocked the door. It opened with a soft creak. The room beyond was frozen in time. A 4-poster bed with curtains of pale blue silk, shelves lined with books, poetry mostly, and histories, a writing desk near the window, ink dried in the well, and on every surface, drawings. Sarah moved closer, examining them. They were all the same image, repeated obsessively, a crescent moon, sometimes alone, sometimes surrounded by symbols she did not recognize. The drawings grew more frantic toward the end, the lines shaky and overlapping. "She drew these in the final weeks," Cain said from the doorway, "before she lost the ability to hold a pen. The healers said it was her mind trying to process what was happening to her, trying to find pattern in chaos." Sarah picked up one of the drawings, held it to the lamplight. Did she know? At the end? Did she understand what she was losing? Yes. His voice was rough. That was the cruelest part. She knew, and she was terrified. Sarah set the drawing down carefully, moved to the wardrobe. Inside hung gowns in jewel tones, emerald, sapphire, deep wine red. She touched the fabric, softer than anything she had ever worn. This had been her sister's life. Court dresses and poetry books, and a mate who would have given her the world. And she had lost it all to a disease that turned her mind against itself. "Tomorrow Moira will examine you," Cain said. "She is the royal healer, the best in the kingdom. She will be able to tell us if you carry the disease." Sarah closed the wardrobe, turned to face him. "And if I do, then we face it together." The certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it made her angry. "You say that now. But you let Aurora go. When it became too difficult, when she asked you to stop fighting, you gave up." "I know." He did not flinch from the accusation. "And I will regret that choice until I die. But Sarah, I am asking you not to make that same choice. If the disease manifests, if you start to lose yourself, do not ask me to let you go, because I will not. Not this time. That is not your decision to make. No, But I am making it anyway." He crossed to her, and she saw the desperation in his eyes. "I failed her. I will not fail you." Before she could respond, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Sarah stood alone in Aurora's room, surrounded by the remnants of a life cut short, and wondered if she was strong enough for what was coming. The next morning, Moira came. She was a small woman, perhaps 60 years old, with gray hair braided in a crown around her head and eyes that missed nothing. She examined Sarah with gentle efficiency, checking her eyes, her reflexes, asking questions about her dreams and memories. "No signs yet," Moira announced finally, "but that means nothing. The disease can remain dormant for years before manifesting, or it may never manifest at all. The 40% chance works both ways." "And if it does appear?" Sarah asked. "Then we monitor it. Treat the symptoms as they arise. There are herbs that can help with the hallucinations, rituals under the new moon that strengthen the mind's hold on reality." Moira packed her instruments away. "You would not be the first to live with this disease, child. Aurora's case was particularly aggressive. That is not guaranteed for you." It should have been reassuring. It was not. That afternoon, Sarah was summoned to the throne room. She arrived to find it filled with men, the Royal Council, Cain had called them. 12 men of varying ages, all dressed in the rich fabrics of nobility, all watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to disdain. Cain sat on a throne of carved oak, looking every inch the ruler. Torrin stood at his right hand. When Sarah entered, Cain gestured to a chair that had been placed near the dais. "Counselors," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "This is Sarah. She is Omega, and she is under my personal protection." One of the men, elderly, with a face like weathered leather, leaned forward. "Protection, Your Majesty? Or something more?" "That remains to be seen, Aldous." Another man, younger with ambitious eyes, spoke up. "The kingdom has been without a Luna for 7 years, Your Majesty. We understand your caution, given past events, but the realm needs stability. An heir. I am aware of the realm's needs, Brennan." A third man, heavy-set and red-faced, added his voice. "With respect, Your Majesty, bringing an unmated Omega to court will only complicate matters. There are several suitable candidates from established houses who are not my mate." Cain's voice was cold. "The moon goddess does not make mistakes, Godfrey. If she has bound me to Sarah, then that is the path I will follow." The 3 men exchanged glances. Sarah saw something pass between them. Understanding, perhaps. Or conspiracy. The meeting continued for another hour. Discussions of taxes and territory disputes, and matters that made Sarah's head spin. She said nothing, merely sat, and endured the occasional speculative glance from the counselors. Afterward, as the room emptied, Torrin appeared at her elbow. "Walk with me," he said quietly. They went to the gardens, where the afternoon sun turned the leaves golden. Torrin was silent until they were well away from the castle walls. "Those 3, he said. "Aldous, Brennan, Godfrey. They were the loudest voices calling for Cain to abandon Aurora when her illness became known. They said an Alpha King could not be tied to a mad Omega, that it showed weakness." Sarah felt cold, despite the warmth. "And now? Now they see you. Another Omega, potentially carrying the same disease, and they see the same weakness. They will push for Cain to reject the mate bond, to choose someone more suitable." Torrin's expression was grim. "Be careful around them, Sarah. They are dangerous men who hide behind propriety." That night, Sarah could not sleep. She paced her rooms, feeling the mate bond pull at her, demanding she seek Cain out. Finally, unable to resist, she wrapped a cloak around her nightgown and slipped into the corridors. She found him on the battlements, staring out at the city spread below. He turned when he heard her approach, and something in his expression softened. "Could not sleep either?" he asked. "Too much has happened. Too quickly." She joined him at the wall, looking out at the thousands of lights scattered through the darkness. "Tomorrow we go to the Celestial Wing." "Yes. I am afraid," she admitted. "Of what I will see. Of what I might become." Cain was quiet for a moment. Then, "I am afraid too." But Sarah, whatever happens, whatever we find there, you will not face it alone. I swear that to you." She looked at him then, really looked at him. Saw past the crown and the title to the man underneath, a man who had loved and lost, and was terrified of losing again. A man who looked at her and saw not just a replacement for what he had lost, but something new, something precious in its own right. "I do not know if I can trust you," she said honestly. "But I want to. Moon goddess, help me. I want to." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, he took her hand, his fingers warm against hers. The mate bond surged at the contact, and for once, Sarah did not fight it. They stood together on the battlements until dawn began to gray the sky, and for the first time since the bond had formed, Sarah felt something that might have been hope. Chapter 5. The Breaking Point. The Celestial Wing stood 3 hours' ride from the capital, deep in a forest so ancient that sunlight barely penetrated the canopy. Sarah rode beside Kane, Torin and 4 guards trailing behind. No one spoke. The weight of what lay ahead pressed down on them like a physical thing. The institution revealed itself gradually through the trees. Walls of gray stone reinforced with veins of silver that caught the filtered light. The silver was not decorative, Sarah realized. It was functional. A prison designed to contain wolves who could not control their shifts. At the gates, a nervous man awaited them. He was perhaps 40, thin, with ink-stained fingers and eyes that would not quite meet Kane's. He bowed deeply as they dismounted. "Your Majesty, I am Corvain, Director of the Celestial Wing. We received your message yesterday." His voice was reedy, uncertain. "I must say, this visit is highly irregular. Patient 127A has been stable, but any disruption—" "I am aware of the risks," Kane said. "This is Sarah, Aurora's twin sister. She has a right to see her." Corvain's gaze snapped to Sarah, and she saw recognition flicker across his face. The resemblance must be striking. He swallowed hard. "Of course. But I must warn you. The patient has deteriorated significantly in recent weeks. She spends perhaps 95% of her time in wolf form, unconscious. The moments of lucidity are rare and brief." "I understand," Sarah said, though her hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists. They followed Corvain through corridors that smelled of herbs and something medicinal that burned Sarah's nose. The walls were thick, the doors reinforced. Through narrow windows and some doors, she caught glimpses of other patients, some pacing, some sitting motionless, some sleeping. All looked lost in ways that had nothing to do with location. Corvain stopped before a door at the end of a hallway. "This is her room. We have kept it as comfortable as possible, but understand, she is not the woman you knew." "I never knew her," Sarah said quietly. "Not as an adult. That is the problem." The director produced a key, unlocked the door. It swung open silently, well-oiled hinges. The room beyond was larger than Sarah expected. Not a cell, more like a bedchamber, though sparsely furnished. A bed with simple linens, a chair by the window, and in the corner, curled on a pile of blankets, a white wolf. Sarah's breath caught. The wolf was painfully thin, ribs visible beneath matted fur. Its eyes were closed, breath shallow. It looked more dead than alive. "Aurora," Sarah whispered. The wolf's ear twitched. Nothing more. Kane's hand was on her shoulder. "Sarah, perhaps we should—" "No." She shrugged off his touch, stepped into the room. The pull of the twin bond was overwhelming now, a physical tug in her chest that she had suppressed for 5 years, had convinced herself was grief and imagination. But it was real. Aurora was real, alive. Sarah crossed to the wolf, knelt on the stone floor. Up close, she could see the way Aurora's paws twitched in sleep, the rapid movement of her eyes beneath closed lids. Dreaming, or trapped in nightmare. "Aurora," Sarah said again, reaching out to touch the matted fur. "It is me. It is Sarah, your sister." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the wolf's eyes opened. They were amber, exactly the same shade as Sarah's own. For 30 seconds, those eyes focused on Sarah's face, and recognition flared there. The twin bond surged between them like lightning, bright and painful and real. The wolf whimpered. Then, in a transformation that seemed to cost every ounce of energy she possessed, Aurora shifted. The woman who lay on the blankets was a ghost of the girl in the painted portrait. Her copper-red hair was long and tangled. Her body was skeletal, skin stretched too tight over bones. But her face was Sarah's own, reflected and hollowed. "You grew," Aurora whispered, her voice cracked from disuse. "You grew so tall." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. "Aurora, I thought you were dead. They told me you were dead. Better that way." Aurora's eyes tracked past Sarah to where Kane stood in the doorway. Something shifted in her expression. Confusion, then understanding dawning slowly. Her gaze dropped to Sarah's throat, to the silver necklace with its crescent moon pendant. Aurora went very still. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Higher. Fragile. "That necklace. I had one just like it." "Aurora," Kane began. "You gave it to her." Aurora's eyes were locked on the pendant now. "You gave her my necklace. It is not the same one," Sarah said quickly. "Aurora, listen." But Aurora was not listening. She was staring at Kane, at Sarah, at the necklace. Sarah watched her sister put the pieces together, watched the realization hit like a physical blow. "You marked her." Aurora's voice cracked. "You felt the mate bond with her. With my sister. My twin." "Aurora, please." Kane moved forward, but Aurora lurched to her feet with shocking speed. "You marked her." The scream was half human, half wolf, a sound that should not have been possible from a human throat. "She wears the same necklace. She has my face. You replaced me." The shift was violent and uncontrolled. Aurora's body convulsed, bones cracking, fur erupting. But the transformation did not complete. She was caught between forms, a nightmare hybrid of human and wolf, and the sound she made was pure agony. Guards burst into the room. Corvain was shouting orders. Someone grabbed Sarah, pulled her back. She saw them restrain Aurora, saw the silver chains they wrapped around her half-shifted form, saw the way her sister thrashed and howled, that terrible sound echoing off stone walls. A needle. Corvain had a needle, was injecting something into Aurora's shoulder. Within seconds, the thrashing slowed. Aurora's eyes, still amber, still painfully aware, found Sarah's one last time. "He chose you," she whispered. "He chose the version that is not broken." Then her eyes rolled back, and she went limp. The guards lowered her to the floor. Aurora's body shifted back to wolf form in unconsciousness, self-preservation taking over. But even asleep, she looked destroyed. Sarah could not breathe, could not think. The room was too small, the walls closing in. She turned and ran. She barely registered Kane calling her name, barely felt the hands that tried to stop her. She ran through the corridors, out the main entrance into the forest. Trees blurred past. Branches caught at her cloak. She ran until her lungs burned. Until she could not run anymore. She collapsed against an ancient oak, sank to the ground, and sobbed. She did not know how long she sat there before Kane found her. He approached quietly, as if she were a wild thing that might bolt. When he was close, he stopped, keeping distance between them. "Sarah, do not." Her voice was raw. "Do not say anything. You need to hear this. I need you to leave me alone." She looked up at him, saw him properly for the first time since fleeing the celestial wing. "She is destroyed, Kane. Completely destroyed. And seeing me, seeing this." She grabbed the necklace, nearly tore it from her throat. It broke what little was left of her. "She is not. She thinks you replaced her," Sarah shouted. "She thinks you looked at me and saw a convenient substitute for the mate you lost. And she is right, is she not? That is exactly what I am." "No." Kane's jaw was tight. "You are not a replacement. You are..." What am I, Kane? Tell me. Because from where I stand, I am the functional version of a woman you loved. The twin who can still speak and think and play the role of mate without the inconvenience of madness. That is not fair." "Fair?" Sarah laughed, bitter and broken. None of this is fair. Aurora did not ask to lose her mind. I did not ask to be bound to a man who looks at me and sees a ghost. And you, she stood, faced him fully. You did not ask for a second chance. But here we are, and all three of us are suffering for it. Cain took a step toward her. If you would just listen. No. I am done listening. I am done being pulled between what you want and what I need, and what Aurora deserves. She backed away from him. You want to know what I think? I think you loved Aurora. I think part of you will always love Aurora. And I think you felt the mate bond with me because my scent reminded you of her. And you convinced yourself it was fate instead of desperate grief. That is not true. Is it not? Sarah's voice cracked. Then tell me this. When you close your eyes at night, which face do you see? Mine or hers? The silence that followed was answer enough. I reject this bond, Sarah said, and the words felt like knives leaving her throat. I, Sarah, reject the mate bond with Cain, Alpha King. I sever whatever tie exists between us. I want nothing to do with a bond built on replacement and grief. The pain was instantaneous and excruciating. Sarah felt it like a physical tearing in her chest, as if something vital was being ripped away. She gasped, doubling over. Across from her, Cain had dropped to his knees, one hand pressed to his chest, his face gray with agony. Sarah, do not... His voice was strangled, but she was already running again. Away from him, away from the pain, away from the impossible choice between herself and her sister. She found the horses where they had left them, still tethered outside the celestial wing. Her hands shook as she untied the gray mare, pulled herself into the saddle. Behind her she heard shouting, but she was already moving, heels digging into the horse's flanks. The forest swallowed her. For 3 days, Sarah traveled alone. She had no clear destination, only a desperate need to put distance between herself and the mate bond that still pulled at her despite the rejection. The pain in her chest was constant, a dull ache that sharpened whenever she thought of Cain. She avoided roads, kept to game trails and streams. At night, she made cold camps, not daring to light fires that might draw attention. She ate sparingly from the supplies she had taken: dried meat, hard bread, a water skin that needed refilling twice a day. On the 3rd night, she found shelter in the ruins of what must have once been a temple. Fallen columns lay like bones across overgrown stone. The roof was mostly gone, open to the stars, but one corner remained intact, offering some protection from the wind. Sarah tied the mare to a sapling, spread her bedroll on the flattest piece of floor she could find. Exhaustion dragged at her. She had not slept properly since fleeing, only brief snatches that left her more tired than rested. She lay down, wrapped her cloak tight, and closed her eyes. When she woke, the sun was high overhead, midday. She had slept through the entire night and half the morning. Sarah sat up slowly, every muscle aching. Her mouth was dry, her head pounding, and she had no memory of the last 4 hours. The realization came slowly. She remembered lying down as the stars were just beginning to appear. That would have been perhaps an hour after sunset. But now the sun was at its zenith. She had lost time. Hours of time, completely absent from her memory. Panic clawed at her throat. Sarah looked down at herself, checking for injuries or blood. Nothing. Her clothes were dusty but intact. The mare still grazed peacefully nearby. Everything seemed normal. Then she saw the drawings. They covered the stones around where she had slept, scratched into the dirt with a stick, drawn in the ash from someone else's old fire. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe, overlapping and spiraling outward. Sarah crawled closer, her hands shaking. The drawings were all portraits. The same face repeated over and over with obsessive precision. Hollow eyes, matted hair, a mouth open in a silent scream. Aurora, and around each portrait, filling every available space, were symbols. Crescent moons, drawn in the same frantic style she had seen in Aurora's room at the castle. The same obsessive repetition. Sarah's breath came in short gasps. She had drawn these. During the hours she could not remember, she had drawn them. Just like Aurora used to do. Just like... No. she whispered. No, no, no. But the evidence was in the dirt, in the ash on her fingers, in the stick lying beside her, its end worn smooth from use. The lunar dissociation was manifesting. She was losing time, drawing obsessively, following the exact same pattern that had destroyed her sister. Sarah sat in the ruins of the ancient temple, surrounded by 100 portraits of Aurora's madness, and understood with terrible clarity that she was not running from her fate. She was running toward it, and there was nowhere left to hide. Chapter 6. The Price of Blood. Sarah returned to the capital on the 5th day. She had not intended to return at all. After fleeing the celestial wing, after 3 days of riding without direction through forests she did not know, she had convinced herself that distance was the answer, that if she put enough miles between herself and Cain, between herself and Aurora, the mate bond would fade, and she could simply disappear into the wilderness. But on the 3rd night, camped in the ruins of an ancient temple, she had lost 4 hours. She remembered making camp, remembered gathering wood for a fire, laying out her bedroll, and then nothing, a void where time should have been. When awareness returned, dawn was breaking, and she was kneeling in the dirt, her fingers covered in mud. Around her, drawn in the earth with obsessive precision, was a massive portrait of Aurora, every detail perfect, the curve of her jaw, the shape of her eyes, even the individual strands of her hair. Encircling the portrait, repeated hundreds of times in increasingly frantic script, the same symbol Aurora had drawn in her final lucid weeks. The crescent moon. Sarah had stared at her mud-caked hands and understood with cold certainty. The disease was manifesting. She was becoming Aurora. The guards at the castle gates recognized her immediately. Within minutes, she was in Moira's examination room, the old healer's gentle hands checking her eyes, her pulse, asking careful questions about what she remembered. Lunar dissociation. Moira confirmed, her expression grave. Stage 1. Initial manifestation. You have perhaps 6 months before you lose control completely, as Aurora did. The words landed like blows. 6 months. Half a year before she would forget who she was, before the voices started, before she became a danger to everyone around her. Cain had been summoned. He stood in the doorway, and Sarah saw her own fear reflected in his face. There must be something, he said. Some treatment. Moira gestured for them both to sit. There is one option. Experimental. Dangerous. But it has worked before in cases of identical twins. She pulled out an ancient text, its pages yellowed with age. A transfusion of essence. Blood and bone marrow exchanged between the twins under the full moon, infused with healing magic passed down through generations of healers. And it works? Sarah asked, hope flaring. It can stabilize the disease. But there is a complication. Moira's expression was somber. The ritual works in both directions. If you donate your essence to Aurora, hoping to cure her, you will divide the disease between you. What she carries, you will carry equally. It may bring her back from the terminal stage, but it guarantees you will develop symptoms. Sarah felt the hope die. So to save her, I condemn myself. Or you use the ritual on yourself preventatively. Strengthen your own resistance. But that leaves Aurora without hope. The silence that followed was suffocating. Cain's hands were clenched on his knees, his jaw tight. Finally, he looked at Moira. What about the mate bond? If we complete it, if I mark her, would that help? Moira hesitated. An Alpha King's bond is powerful. It could fortify her mind, delay the disease's progression. But it does not cure Cain. It only buys time. And if the bond fails to hold, you would be permanently tied to a mate losing herself to madness. I do not care about that. You should. Moira's voice was sharp. Because if you mark her and the disease progresses anyway, watching her deteriorate will destroy you. I saw what Aurora's illness did to you. This would be worse because you would be bound to her through every moment of it. Sarah stood abruptly. I need time. To think. She left before either of them could stop her, retreating to her rooms. But there was no peace there, no clarity. Every option led to pain. Save herself and leave Aurora to die alone in that terrible place. Save Aurora and accept that in 6 months she would be the one locked away, or accept the mate bond and tie Kane to a future of grief. The decision was taken from her hands 3 days later. Sarah was in the library, trying to distract herself with books she could not focus on, when Torin found her. His expression was grim. The council knows about Aurora. Someone leaked the information. Sarah's stomach dropped. How? Does it matter? They are convening an emergency session, demanding that Kane appear before them to explain why he has been hiding a diseased Omega in a royal facility for 5 years. Torin's hand rested on his sword hilt. Aldous, Brennan, and Godfrey are leading the charge. They are calling it a threat to the realm. In the throne room, the council had assembled in force. All 12 members, their faces ranging from concerned to openly hostile. Kane sat on his throne, his expression carved from stone. Sarah stood at the edge of the room, near Torin, watching. Aldous rose first, his aged voice carrying clearly, "Your Majesty, we have learned of a disturbing situation. An Omega afflicted with lunar dissociation has been housed at the Celestial Wing for 5 years, at royal expense, kept secret from this council. We demand an explanation. Aurora's illness is not a state matter," Kane said coldly. "She was my mate. I ensured she received care. That is all you need to know." "Was your mate," Brennan interjected. "Past tense. She has not been lucid in years. By all accounts, she is a danger. To herself, to the facility staff, to anyone who approaches her. Ancient law is clear, Your Majesty. Wolves who lose themselves to madness must be exiled or executed for the safety of the realm." The room erupted in murmurs. Sarah felt ice flood her veins. Kane's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "You will not touch her, Your Majesty," Godfrey said, standing. "We understand your attachment. But you have brought another Omega to court, one who may carry the same disease. You cannot tie yourself to madness twice. The realm needs stability, an heir, a Luna who can fulfill her duties. I will choose my own Luna, and it will not be at the council's dictation." Aldous leaned forward. "Then you leave us no choice. We must vote on whether this situation represents a threat to the Crown's judgment, whether intervention is necessary." Sarah watched Kane's expression harden. She saw the moment he understood what they were truly saying. Not intervention. Coup. The session ended in tense silence. But as Sarah left the throne room, Torin pulled her aside into an empty corridor. "They are going to move against him," he said quietly. "Those 3 have been building support for months, waiting for an excuse. Aurora gives them that excuse. They will claim Kane is unfit to rule because he cannot let go of a mad Omega. They will move to depose him and install someone more pliable. Can they do that? If they move quickly and violently, yes. The council has that power in extreme circumstances." His expression was dark. "And I think I know their first move. They will go to the Celestial Wing, execute Aurora publicly, prove that Kane is weak for protecting her." Horror washed over Sarah. "When? Soon. Days, maybe hours. I have a man watching them, but we need to warn Kane." They found him in his study, already reading a report that made his face go pale. "Riders left the capital this morning. 20 mercenaries, hired by persons unknown, heading north, toward the Celestial Wing," Sarah said. "Yes." Kane was already moving, buckling on his sword. "Torin, gather our loyal men. Everyone you trust completely. We ride now." "How many?" Torin asked. "Whoever can be ready in 10 minutes. We cannot wait for a full force." They left the capital in a storm of hoofbeats. Kane, Sarah, Torin, and 10 guards whose loyalty to their king outweighed their fear. The ride to the Celestial Wing took 2 days of brutal pace, changing horses at way stations, sleeping in snatches in the saddle. They arrived to find smoke rising from the facility's courtyard. The battle had already begun. The mercenaries had breached the gates, were fighting the facility's guards in brutal close combat. Sarah saw bodies on the ground, could not tell if they were mercenaries or defenders. Kane did not hesitate. He and his men crashed into the fight with the precision of warriors who had trained together for years. Steel rang against steel. Men shouted and died. Sarah dismounted, staying close to the walls. Torin had pressed a dagger into her hand before they charged. "If anyone comes at you, use this. Do not hesitate." She watched Cain cut through 2 mercenaries, his movements fluid and deadly. Watched Torin fight back to back with one of the guards. The violence was overwhelming, the smell of blood thick in the air. And then she heard it. A howl that raised every hair on her body. From the damaged gates of the facility, a white wolf emerged. Skeletal thin, fur matted, eyes wild, but unmistakably Aurora. The chaos of battle had broken open her cell. Aurora attacked indiscriminately. She tore through a mercenary, her jaws closing on his throat. Turned on a facility guard who tried to calm her. She was pure instinct, pure madness, recognizing no one and nothing. Sarah moved without thinking. She ran toward her sister, ignoring Torin's shout of warning. "Aurora!" The wolf turned. For a heartbeat, there was recognition in those wild eyes. The twin bond flared between them, a connection that transcended reason and disease. Aurora lunged, not to attack, to reach. She knocked Sarah to the ground, and Sarah wrapped her arms around the skeletal wolf, feeling ribs through thin fur. "I know you," Sarah whispered. "I know you are still in there." The wolf shuddered, whined, and then, miracle of miracles, began to shift. Aurora's human form was shocking. Emaciated, her copper hair matted and filthy, scars covering her arms from restraints. But her eyes, for just a moment, were clear. "You grew," Aurora said, her voice rusty from disuse. "You grew so much." "I am here." Sarah was crying. "I am here, and I am going to save you." Aurora's gaze moved past her. Saw Cain, sword in hand, staring at them both. Saw the necklace around Sarah's throat, the crescent moon. Understanding flooded her face, followed by devastating pain. "He marked you," Aurora whispered. "You are his now." "Aurora, it is not." But Aurora was screaming. A sound of anguish so profound it seemed to tear from her soul. She tried to shift again, to flee back into the safety of madness, but Sarah held on. "Moira!" Sarah shouted. The healer had come with them, was sheltering behind an overturned cart. "The ritual! Now!" "You cannot. The conditions are not right." "I do not care. She is dying anyway. Do it." Moira ran to them, pulling instruments from her bag with shaking hands. "This will hurt. Both of you. And Sarah. If you do this, there is no undoing it. I know." Sarah looked at her sister's ravaged face. "I know." The ritual was agony. Moira cut into Sarah's arm, then Aurora's, pressed the wounds together, chanting words in a language older than the kingdom. Sarah felt her essence flowing out, felt Aurora's flowing in, felt the disease transfer between them like poison diluted by clean water. Aurora's eyes cleared further. Color returned to her face. The frantic wildness in her expression eased, and Sarah felt the disease settle into her own mind like a shadow. Heard the first whisper of voices that were not her own. The ritual took minutes that felt like hours. When Moira finally bound their arms with clean cloth, separating them, both twins were gasping. Around them, the battle had ended. Cain's forces had won. The mercenaries were dead or captured. And in the sudden quiet, Sarah and Aurora sat in the bloodied courtyard, changed forever. Aurora looked at her with eyes that saw, that knew. "Why?" "Because you are my sister, and I will not lose you again." Cain approached slowly, sheathing his sword. He looked between them, seeing the change in Aurora, seeing the cost Sarah had paid. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Get them both inside. Treat their wounds. And someone find whoever hired those mercenaries. I want them in chains by sunset." As guards helped them to their feet, Sarah felt the disease settling deeper. 6 months, Moira had said. But looking at Aurora standing upright for the first time in years, seeing clarity in her eyes, Sarah thought perhaps it was worth it, even if it meant she would eventually end up in the same cell Aurora had just escaped. Chapter 7. mending what was broken. The healers declared Aurora stabilized 3 days after the ritual. Sarah watched from the doorway as Moira examined her sister in one of the Celestial Wing's recovery rooms, now cleaned and repaired after the battle. Aurora sat upright on the bed, actually sat instead of lying comatose or pacing in wolf form. Her copper hair had been washed and braided. Color had returned to her cheeks. When Moira asked her questions, Aurora answered in full sentences. "Do you know where you are?" "The Celestial Wing, the place I have been for 5 years." "Do you know who I am?" "Moira, Royal Healer. You tried to help me before." Aurora's voice was steady, but Sarah heard the tremor underneath. "Before I forgot how to be human." Moira made notes, nodding. "The transfusion worked better than I dared hope. You are in stage 2 now. Not cured, but manageable. You will have episodes, moments when the disease flares. But with proper treatment, you should maintain lucidity most of the time." Aurora's hands twisted in the blanket. "And Sarah? Also stage 2. She carries what you carried, divided equally between you." Moira's expression was kind but honest. "You both will live with this for the rest of your lives. But you will live." After Moira left, Sarah stepped into the room. Aurora looked up, and something complicated passed across her face. Not quite welcome, not quite resentment. Something between, "You should not have done it," Aurora said quietly. Sarah sat in the chair beside the bed. "I could not let you die. I was already dead. Had been for years. You should have saved yourself. You are my sister. I am a stranger wearing your sister's face." Aurora's voice was bitter. "I do not remember half my life. The girl you knew died when the disease took her. What came back is just pieces." Sarah reached for Aurora's hand. Her sister flinched but did not pull away. "Then we will gather the pieces together, relearn each other." Aurora's eyes filled with tears. "He is your mate now. I saw the necklace. I heard how he said your name. Aurora, I do not blame you." The words came out rushed, desperate. "I saw his face when he looked at you. Even through the madness, I saw it. He loves you. Really loves you. Not the memory of who I was. You. I did not mean to." "I know." Aurora squeezed her hand, then let go. "But it still hurts, knowing I am so easily replaced." "You were never replaced." Sarah's voice was fierce. "What Kane felt for you was real. What he feels for me is different. Separate. You do not have to forgive me for the mate bond, but please believe that I did not take what was yours." The moon goddess made her choice. Aurora was silent for a long moment. Then, "I asked him to let me go." "Did he tell you that?" "In my last moments of clarity before they brought me here, I begged him not to force himself to love someone who was disappearing. He cried. I had never seen him cry before." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "He is a good man." Aurora continued softly. "He tried everything to save me. Spent a fortune. Consulted every healer. And when nothing worked, when I asked him to stop, he honored that. Even though it destroyed him." She met Sarah's eyes. "Do not punish him for loving you. He has punished himself enough for losing me." The battle at the Celestial Wing had ended in total victory for Kane's forces. All 20 mercenaries were dead or captured. Under interrogation, conducted by Torin with brutal efficiency, they confessed everything. Aldous, Brennan, and Godfrey had hired them. The plan had been to execute Aurora publicly, declare Kane unfit for protecting a mad Omega, and install Godfrey's son as the new Alpha King. The 3 counselors were arrested within hours of Kane's return to the capital. Their trial was swift, the evidence overwhelming. They were stripped of titles, lands, and honor, then exiled to the harshest territories on the kingdom's edge. "A fate worse than execution," Torin said. Death would have been mercy. Corvain, the Celestial Wing's director, was brought before Kane in chains. Sarah watched from her place beside the throne as the nervous man knelt, trembling. "You aided them," Kane said, his voice cold. "Gave them information about Aurora's condition. Told them when the guards would be fewest. They threatened my family, Your Majesty." Corvain's voice shook. "My wife, my daughters. They said if I did not help, they would ensure my family suffered for my loyalty to you. And you believed them. I did. I am a coward, Your Majesty. I confess it freely, but I never wanted Aurora harmed. I have cared for her for 5 years. His voice broke. I thought if I gave them small things, harmless information, they would leave my family alone. I did not know they would attack. Cain studied him for a long moment. Then, you will continue to direct the Celestial Wing. But you will implement reforms. This place will no longer be a prison for those society finds inconvenient. It will be a true healing facility. Families will be allowed to visit. Patients will be treated with dignity. And you will answer directly to me. One more failure, one more moment of cowardice, and exile will be the kindest thing I do to you. Am I clear? Corvain's relief was palpable. Yes, Your Majesty. Thank you, Your Majesty. 3 months passed in careful healing. Sarah and Aurora were given separate wings of the castle. Close, but not overlapping. They took meals together sometimes, walked the gardens when both felt strong. The disease manifested in small ways. Sarah lost time once, woke to find she had spent 2 hours drawing crescent moons on parchment. Aurora had an episode where she shifted involuntarily, her wolf form appearing for terrifying seconds before she wrestled back control. But Moira was always there. The herbs helped. The new moon rituals, ancient ceremonies that strengthened the mind's grip on reality, helped more. Slowly, both twins found a rhythm. The relationship between them was complex. There were days when Aurora could barely look at Sarah without pain in her eyes. Days when Sarah felt crushing guilt for having what her sister had lost. But there were also good days. Days when they sat together, and Aurora told stories of the court before her illness. Days when Sarah shared memories of their childhood that Aurora had forgotten. Cain visited them both equally. With Aurora, he was gentle, respectful, treating her like something precious but fragile. With Sarah, he was different. There was heat in his glances, want that he tried and failed to hide, but he never pushed, never demanded. The turning point came 3 months after the ritual. Aurora had been lucid for 3 days straight, the longest stretch since her illness began. On the 3rd evening, she came to Sarah's rooms and asked to speak privately. They sat by the fire, cups of spiced wine warming their hands. I need to tell you something, Aurora said. While I still can, while my mind is clear. Sarah waited. I was not entirely honest with you before. About what happened with Cain. Aurora stared into her wine. The disease started slowly. Memory loss first. I would lose hours, wake in strange places, and I was terrified. So terrified that I clung to Cain like he was the only solid thing in a world that was dissolving. Anyone would have... Let me finish. Aurora's voice was firm. I clung to him, made him promise he would never leave me, never give up. And he tried. Moon goddess, he tried everything. But as I got worse, as the episodes became more frequent and violent, I realized something. He did not love me anymore. He loved the memory of who I had been, and he was staying out of obligation, out of guilt. Sarah's chest ached. So, in one of my last clear moments, I released him. I told him I did not want a mate bond based on pity, that I would rather be alone than be a burden. And I meant it. Aurora looked up, meeting Sarah's eyes. He did not abandon me. I set him free. There is a difference. Why tell me this now? Because I see how you look at him, like you are afraid to want him, like you think accepting the bond would be a betrayal of me. Aurora reached across, took her hand. It would not be. Sarah, you saved my life. You gave up your own health to bring me back from madness. The least I can do is give you my blessing to be happy. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. I do not know if I deserve him. Neither does he, which makes you perfect for each other. Aurora smiled, sad but genuine. Love him. Let him love you. Do not waste time on guilt that serves no one. That night, Sarah went to Cain. She found him in his private study, surrounded by maps and reports. He looked up when she entered, surprise and something warmer crossing his face. Sarah, is everything? I need to know something, she interrupted. And I need you to be honest. He set down his quill. Always. Why do you want me? The question came out raw. Is it because I remind you of her? Because my scent calls to some ghost of what you lost? Kane stood, came around the desk. At first, yes. Your scent was identical to hers. It pulled at memories I had tried to bury. But Sarah? He stopped in front of her, close but not touching. You are nothing like Aurora. You challenge me, fight me. You ran into battle to save your sister without hesitation. You sacrificed your own health without being asked. Aurora was gentle water. You are wildfire. And I, his voice roughened, I have fallen in love with the fire, even knowing I carry the disease, that I might end up like she was, even knowing. He cupped her face gently. I failed Aurora by giving up when she asked me to. I will not fail you. If the disease takes you, I will fight it with everything I have, and if it wins, I will love you through every moment of losing you. That is my promise. Sarah kissed him. It was not gentle. It was desperate and fierce and full of 3 months of wanting. Kane responded with equal hunger, his hands sliding into her hair, pulling her closer. The mate bond sang between them, demanding completion. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah said, "Mark me. Complete the bond. I choose you, Kane. I choose this. All of it. Are you certain?" I have never been more certain of anything. The ceremony was held under the full moon in the castle gardens. Smaller than a traditional royal mating, Sarah had insisted. Just those who mattered. Torrin stood as witness, newly promoted to commander of the royal guard for his loyalty during the coup attempt. Moira attended to bless the union with herbs and ancient words. And Aurora watched from a balcony above, wrapped in a cloak against the night chill. When Sarah looked up and met her sister's eyes, Aurora smiled and nodded. Permission. Blessing. Sarah wore a gown of silver silk that caught the moonlight. Her copper hair was loose, woven with small white flowers. Kane wore formal leathers, his circlet of office catching the torchlight. Moira spoke the old words, binding them before the moon goddess. When it came time for the marking, Kane knelt before Sarah, looking up at her with an expression of such raw devotion it stole her breath. "I love you," he said simply, not as a replacement, not as an echo, but as yourself. "My mate, my Luna, my heart. I love you," Sarah replied, her voice strong. "I choose you. I choose us. Whatever time we have, however long or short. I choose to spend it bound to you." When his teeth sank into her throat, marking her permanently as his, the mate bond exploded into full brilliance. Sarah felt it settle into her bones, her blood, her very soul, and with it came strength. The disease, which had been a constant whisper in her mind, quieted. Not gone. Never gone. But held at bay by the sheer force of the bond between them. Kane marked her 3 times, throat, wrist, shoulder, traditional places, binding them in ways that could never be severed. When he finished, Sarah pulled him up and kissed him as the small gathering applauded. Above them, Aurora raised her cup in silent toast, then disappeared into the castle. That night, lying in Kane's arms in his chambers, Sarah felt something she had not felt in years. Peace. The disease still lurked. The future was uncertain, but she was not alone. She had her sister back, fragile but healing. She had a mate who loved her fiercely. She had a purpose. "What are you thinking?" Kane murmured against her hair. "That I am exactly where I am meant to be." His arms tightened around her. "As am I." Outside, the moon shone silver and full, blessing them both. Chapter 8. Legacy of Light. 6 years later, Sarah stood in the walled garden behind the castle's east wing, watching her daughters play among the herb beds. Ellen, with her father's black hair and her mother's amber eyes, was carefully examining a yarrow plant, mimicking the way Sarah had shown her to check for pest damage. Maren, copper-haired like Sarah and Aurora, was less interested in the herbs and more interested in chasing a butterfly between the rows. "Mama, this one is sick," Ellen called, her 4-year-old voice serious. "See? The leaves are spotty." Sarah crossed to her daughter, kneeling in the soft earth. "Good eye, little one. That is powdery mildew." We will need to remove those leaves so it does not spread to the healthy plants. Can we make medicine from the sick parts? No, but we can compost them. Even sick plants can help new ones grow. Sarah brushed a strand of dark hair from Ellen's face. Everything has purpose, even things that seem broken. It was a lesson she had learned the hard way, a lesson she tried to pass on to her daughters, hoping they would grow up in a kingdom that understood brokenness did not mean worthless. Sarah, she turned to see Aurora approaching across the garden, 1-year-old Gareth balanced on her hip. Her sister looked well today, hair brushed and braided, color in her cheeks, eyes clear and focused. The good days outnumbered the bad now, though the disease still flared during certain moon phases. But Aurora had learned to feel the episodes coming, had learned to retreat to her rooms with Moira's help before the madness could take hold publicly. "He was fussing for you," Aurora said, transferring the squirming boy into Sarah's arms. Gareth immediately grabbed a fistful of Sarah's hair, cooing happily. He was nearly identical to Cain. The same gray eyes, the same stubborn set to his jaw even at this young age. "Thank you for watching him." Sarah kissed her son's forehead, breathing in his sweet baby scent. "How are you feeling?" "Stable, lucid. The rituals last night helped." Aurora settled onto the stone bench that overlooked the garden, watching Marin finally catch her butterfly only to immediately release it. "I had a thought this morning. A clear one, not a voice or a vision. That is worth celebrating." Sarah sat beside her sister, adjusting Gareth on her lap. 6 years of living with the disease had taught them both to mark the victories, however small. A week without episodes, a month of clarity. Each one a gift. "Do you remember the day of the transfusion?" Aurora asked suddenly. "When I first saw you clearly after years of madness? Every detail. I was so angry. Angry that you had condemned yourself to save me. Angry that Cain had chosen you. Angry that I had lost years I could never recover." Aurora's voice was soft, reflective. "But now, sitting here watching your daughters play, watching you be the Luna I could never have been, I realized something. We saved each other that day. Not just you saving me. Both of us." Sarah reached for her sister's hand. "How do you mean?" "You gave me back my life. Partial, imperfect, but mine. And I," Aurora squeezed her fingers, "I gave you permission to be happy without guilt, to love Cain without feeling like you stole something. We needed each other to be whole." The twin bond hummed between them, stronger now than it had ever been before the disease. Sharing the illness had created a connection deeper than blood. They could sense each other's episodes coming, could ground each other when the voices started, could be each other's anchor when reality became slippery. "The council meeting tomorrow," Sarah said. "Are you ready?" Aurora had become something unexpected in the years since her recovery. Cain had appointed her as his official advisor on matters concerning mental illness among shifters. Her experience, her survival, had given her insight no one else possessed. She advocated for reforms, for better treatment facilities, for removing the stigma that had nearly killed her. Under her guidance, the Celestial Wing had transformed from a prison into a true healing center. Corvain, terrified of failing Cain again, had implemented every suggestion Aurora made. Families could visit their sick loved ones. Patients were treated with dignity and compassion. The new moon rituals that helped Aurora and Sarah were taught to others suffering from lunar dissociation. "I am ready," Aurora said. "We have 3 new cases this month. All young, all terrified. I want to expand the treatment program to include family counseling. Help them understand that this disease does not have to be a death sentence." Sarah felt pride swell in her chest. Her sister had taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and transformed it into something that helped others. That was courage beyond measure. "Mama," Marin ran up, grass-stained and breathless. "Can Aunt Aurora tell us about the wolves? The ones in the north?" Aurora smiled, and it reached her eyes. Something that had taken years to happen naturally again. "Which story? The white wolves of the mountain passes? Or the silver wolves of the frozen lakes?" "Both." As Aurora began weaving a tale for the girls, her voice animated and clear, Sarah watched and marveled. This was not the future she had imagined 6 years ago. Not when she was fleeing through the forest, not when she was kneeling in that temple drawing portraits in the dirt. but it was better than anything she could have designed. Footsteps on the garden path made her look up. Cain appeared, freshly washed from training, but still wearing his practice leathers. His hair was damp, his beard trimmed short as always. When his eyes found hers, they still held that heat that made the mate bond thrum. 6 years of marriage had not dulled what they felt for each other. If anything, it had deepened. They had weathered Sarah's episodes together, the times when she lost hours, when the voices commanded her to do strange things. Cain had learned to recognize the signs before she did, would take her to Moira or help her through the rituals himself, and on the worst days, when Sarah was convinced she was losing herself permanently, he would hold her and remind her who she was. "The girls are terrorizing your herbs again," he said, settling onto the bench beside her. Gareth immediately reached for him, and Cain took his son with practiced ease. "They are learning. There is a difference. Ellen asked me this morning if we could turn the western courtyard into a treatment garden, full of healing plants." He chuckled. "She is 4 and already planning improvements to the castle. She takes after her father. She takes after her mother." Cain leaned over, kissed Sarah's temple. The casual affection still made her heart skip. Speaking of which, Torin sent word. He and Scylla will join us for dinner. They want to discuss the new training protocols for the guard. Torin had found his mate 3 years ago, a fierce beta warrior named Scylla, who gave orders as effectively as she took them. Their son, now 2, was already showing signs of becoming as formidable as his parents. Torin commanded an expanded guard that was loyal to Cain absolutely, the memory of the coup attempt still fresh in everyone's mind. The 3 traitor counselors had been exiled to the harsh northern territories, where survival required constant work and offered no comfort. Reports said Aldous had died within the first year. Brennan and Godfrey still lived, barely, in conditions that made execution seem merciful by comparison. Their lands had been redistributed to families who had lost members in their attempted coup. "Sarah," Aurora's voice pulled her attention back. Her sister had finished the story and was watching her with an expression Sarah had learned to recognize. "News. Important news. What is it?" "A messenger arrived this morning. From the Eastern Kingdoms. They have a case. Triplets. All showing early signs of lunar dissociation. The youngest is only 12. Their family is desperate, has heard of the treatments we developed here." Aurora paused. "They are asking for help. Specifically, for us." Sarah felt something stir in her chest. The network she had built over the past 6 years, support systems for Omegas with hereditary diseases, training programs for healers, distribution of treatment protocols, had spread beyond their kingdom's borders. Other realms had begun reaching out, seeking knowledge and assistance. "Triplets," she said slowly. "That is rare. The transfusion ritual would need to be modified. Moira thinks it is possible, but it would require both of us, our combined experience." Aurora met her eyes. "It would mean traveling. 2 weeks there, at least a month treating them, 2 weeks back, nearly 2 months away from home." Sarah looked at her daughters, both now climbing on Cain like he was a tree meant for the purpose. Looked at Gareth, who had fallen asleep against his father's chest. 2 months away from them felt impossible, but then she thought of 3 children, 12 years old or younger, terrified as their minds began to fracture. Thought of their family watching helplessly, not knowing that help existed. "I would go," she said quietly. Cain's hand found hers. "I know you would, and I would not stop you." He looked at Aurora. "You would both go?" "If Sarah agrees, yes. We are stronger together." The triplets would benefit from seeing 2 people who survived this disease, who learned to thrive despite it. "Then you have my blessing." Cain's voice was steady, though Sarah felt the mate bond tighten slightly. His worry, his reluctance to be parted from her. "But not alone. Torin and Scylla will accompany you, full guard detail. I will not risk either of you to bandits or rogues." Aurora smiled. "Protective as ever. You are my sister by mating law, and Sarah is my heart. Forgive me for wanting to keep you both safe." They stayed in the garden as the afternoon stretched toward evening, watching the girls play, passing Gareth between them when he woke fussy and needed multiple people's attention. This was life now. Not perfect. Sarah still had episodes. Aurora still had bad days when she could not leave her rooms, but it was full, rich, worth fighting for. Later, after the children had been fed and put to bed, after dinner with Taurine and Scylla had filled the hall with laughter and planning, Sarah stood with Cain on their private balcony overlooking the city. "Are you afraid?" he asked, arms wrapped around her from behind. "Of traveling so far? Of being away?" "Terrified," she admitted, but also excited. "These children, Cain, we can help them. We can give them years they might not have otherwise. How can I not go?" "You cannot. It is who you are." He turned her to face him. The woman who ran into battle to save her sister, who sacrificed her own health without hesitation, who has spent 6 years building something beautiful from something terrible. His thumb traced her cheekbone. "You are the strongest person I have ever known, Sarah, and I am grateful every day that the moon goddess bound me to you. Even with the episodes, the lost time, the nights when I wake screaming from voices that are not there, even then, especially then." His kiss was soft, reverent. "You are not your disease. You are what you have built despite it." The next morning, Sarah and Aurora met with Moira to plan the journey. The old healer was thrilled at the possibility of treating triplets. The medical knowledge gained could help dozens of others. She prepared packets of herbs, wrote detailed instructions, gave both sisters additional training in the modified ritual. "You will be ambassadors," Moira said as she worked. "Not just healers. You will show the Eastern kingdoms that lunar dissociation is not a death sentence, that those who suffer from it can still contribute, still lead meaningful lives. That is worth more than any medicine." The departure was set for 3 days hence. Sarah spent the time with her children, memorizing their faces, their laughs, the way Ellen's nose wrinkled when she concentrated, and Marin's habit of singing to herself. Gareth, too young to understand, simply clung to her whenever she held him. On the morning they were to leave, the entire family gathered in the courtyard. Taurine and Scylla had assembled a guard detail of 12, enough for protection without being ostentatious. The horses were packed with supplies and medical equipment. Cain held Sarah close one last time. "Come back to me," he whispered against her hair. "Always." She pulled back, cupped his bearded face. "I am bound to you. The mate bond will lead me home no matter how far I travel." He kissed her deeply, not caring who watched. When they parted, she saw tears in his gray eyes. Sarah mounted her horse, Aurora doing the same beside her. Her sister looked determined, clear-eyed, ready. They had survived the impossible together. This journey was just another challenge to face side by side. As they rode through the castle gates, Sarah looked back once, saw Cain standing with their children, Ellen on one side, Marin on the other, Gareth in his arms. Saw the castle that had become home, the kingdom that had accepted her despite everything. Then she turned forward, toward the road ahead, toward children who needed help. She and Aurora had been given a second chance at life. The least they could do was offer the same to others. Beside her, Aurora began to sing, an old song their mother had taught them as children. Sarah joined in, their voices blending as they always had, twin harmonies that spoke of shared pain and shared strength. 2 sisters, bound by blood and disease and love, riding toward a future they would build together, one life at a time. The end.